Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be doing a little rock carving in XPS pink foam around one of our products, a Zscale concrete snow shed. These sheds are available exclusively at Zscale Monster. Links in the description below. We'll be using single edge razor blades and a basic utility knife. Okay, let's jump in. We're using 2-inch foam cut on a Proxxon hot wire foam cutter, one of my favorite tools. We're also going to be using another of our pieces, a concrete tunnel portal embedded in rock face. Well, at least that's the initial plan. As you can tell by a previous video, I'm a big fan of using 5-minute epoxy for attaching foam to foam. I've carved out an area on one of the pieces of foam that will be the tunnel, but as you'll see, I didn't quite factor in the full width of this portal piece, so I'll have to reduce its width. I'm using an old pair of wire cutters to gently nibble away at the gypsum. In addition to reducing the portal width with the wire cutters, I've also had to begin cutting into the foam. And one thing I'd really like to stress here is the use of cut-resistant gloves. As I'll be doing a lot of razor work here, these gloves just make sense. The gray nitrile gloves are great for working clean and they look pretty spiffy on camera, but when it comes to razor work, the cut-resistant gloves are a must for me. I've had to cut a thin piece of add-on foam with the Proxxon for the shed roof to sit against what will be the rock face. I did say this Proxxon is a favorite of mine. I'm just loosely defining a basic shape here. Now, we're sort of limited given the corner design of this piece, but I like to try and visualize the overall look at this early stage. I like to use the utility knife to make some initial cuts, and not so cleverly, I'm still wearing the nitrile gloves here. It's just too easy to forget to put on the proper gloves. A great rule of thumb is to always cut away from your hands, and in addition to the wrong gloves, I'm also making some awkward cuts here due to the camera mount. But that's not a great excuse. I haven't done this rock carving in a while, so I'm definitely rusty. But rusty or not, I tend to jump from area to area, as I find this helps with overall consistency in the end. Since I am rusty, I just took a small piece of foam and with a single edge razor, played around a bit. Between using most of the blade square against the foam, or digging into the foam with the corner of the blade and also tearing a bit, I think I can make this work. Always the optimist. Now as I look over this footage, I realize I don't have an exact set of steps to the way I cut. I'm starting to use the single edge a bit in one section, even though I've got a lot more work to do with the utility knife. I never want this to feel like work, like I have to follow exact directions. I like to have fun with this kind of project and try and get a little creative. I'm not trying to reproduce a specific style of rock, given that I'm rusty. I think I've mentioned that. I'm just trying for a generic rock look, keeping expectations in check at this point. Years ago, I played a bit with bonsai trees, even took a few classes. One thing I do remember about those classes can also apply to a project like this. while there's a definite front view, the piece should look good from all angles. It's subjective, of course, but especially with small pieces like this, I want it to have a look from all angles. At this point, I'm doing more jumping around with my cuts, as you can see, though I am starting to work more with the small single edge blades. Also, I'm digging into that section of foam that the roof of the shed will sit next to. It was at about this point that I realized this portal and rock face gypsum piece wasn't working for me the way I thought it would. I think this is due to the small size of this diorama. I'd gone back in with the wire cutter and nibbled away more and more on the portal, but well, we'll get back to the portal in a few minutes. For now, I'm just going to keep cutting and having a bit of fun. I'm trying to add a little depth here and there with some recessed areas, as well as a fracture or two in the rock face. Also starting to add just a bit of texture using the single edge blade with smaller and smaller cuts. Again, I'm trying to keep this simple, not thinking of any specific rocks, just cutting until I see something I kind of like. I think at this point, the basic overall shape is in place. Now I'm just doing lots of nibbling with the single edge blades. Now on the blades, this foam will dull these blades incredibly quickly, but that's not always a bad thing, as a dull blade will sometimes rip the foam instead of actually cut it, and that can be interesting too. The foam area around the portal has been recut into something like a 45-degree angle, but just in this one area. I thought this angle would break up the look of the rest of my carving and make the portal and the shed stand out a bit more, maybe make it more of a focal point. It was around now that I was curious to see how this would look in a color that wasn't pink. I sprayed some Rust-Oleum gray paint on a separate piece to make sure it wouldn't melt the foam. After a coat of this aerosol, it's starting to look a little bit like rocks to me, and I kinda like the 45-degree cuts above the portal. I was so busy cutting, I missed a joint area of the foam, which resulted in a protruding line of epoxy where I joined the foam earlier. Well, I actually missed it until I looked at this video, but it's not the end of the world. For my first razor foam attempt in some time, I wasn't unhappy with the way it looked, but I wanted to fill in some of the razor marks here. So I made up my own flex paste recipe using construction adhesive mixed with some acrylic paint. And this is where I started to make a few mistakes, in my opinion. As this foam was already very firm, it really didn't need this DIY paste covering it, and it actually had the effect of softening the rock edges. Also, it created round bumps over very small bits of angular foam, which would have looked much better without my paste recipe applied. As long as I'm coming clean, here's my second big mistake. I did it again. I wanted to go with sort of a brown rock color, something that might be found around California snow sheds, so I applied another layer of my paste recipe. Of course, this had the effect of softening the rocks even more. These are mistakes I'll avoid next time. I put the model aside to let the paste dry and thought I'd put the snow shed together. I saw this plastic bonder by JB Weld and I thought I'd give it a try. The snow shed bag contains the roof, the legs, an emery board for cleaning up any flash that might still be on the model, and directions. Assembling the shed is dead simple. Just mix up and apply a bit of this JB Weld product or any other adhesive you choose, such as 5-minute epoxy, to the top of the legs. Then place the legs on the underside of the roof, check to make sure everything's straight, and let the adhesive cure. I recently tried Behr spray paint for the first time, and it's quickly become a new favorite of mine. The color I've used here is called Lunar Surface Flat. It goes on with a minimum of spatter, coverage is very good, and the color looks a lot like gray gypsum. It gives the snow shed a nice base color. It's a really good starting point for additional weathering colors. I found some short sections of basic wood molding at Home Depot. This was a bit under $4 for a 4-foot section. Perfect. The diorama sits right inside, and I added a bit of epoxy to the side of the base to attach it permanently. Here I went back to that construction adhesive recipe, a little craft paint mixed in, to fill in the gaps between the molding and the foam. A step I didn't show was that I painted the base to make it look a bit like aged wood. A little blue painter's tape for a clean line, and this is a very quick way to give this base a clean, cool look. Okay, now back to the portal. This is the same portal that was part of the larger portal shown earlier. I cast a couple of these portal-only models without the rocks in both resin and gypsum. The resin was pressure cast, and after applying this adhesion promoter and paint, I think it looks remarkably similar to the gypsum pieces. Cracking on here, I'm adding soil to the top of the paste mix from a moment ago. I've got both red and brown soils. Actually, some of the red soil is red clay that I've nipped from a couple of the local baseball diamonds. And this is usually a mix of things like clay, sand, limestone. It's interesting stuff. I gave the soil a good spray of alcohol to allow this homemade scenic cement to better sink in. This recipe is 3 parts water to 1 part Mod Podge with a drop or 2 of dishwashing soap to further reduce surface tension, again allowing it to flow easier. I went a bit heavy on the scenic cement. Okay, I created a flood. I then took a tissue and dabbed up some of the excess cement. The cement will darken the soil just a bit, and if you leave an area flooded, I found it can actually create a bit of a matte finish, and not something you want on your soil or ballast. I added more color to my rock work, and this is another mistake on my part, I'm afraid. The coloring was heavy-handed, and frankly, I was tempted to scrap this entire piece and start again. Overall, I think I was on a better track earlier after this initial coat of gray paint. We can all make mistakes when creating scenery, but I thought it was important to show the missteps I made here. It's a great way to learn. I actually think I'm going to be doing another rock from foam video right after this. As I was this far along, I decided to finish up with a bit of static grass and some bushes, as well as add a few furnace filter trees I'd made for a different project. I didn't add track to this scene as many old snow sheds are now part of walking trails, which I think is pretty neat. It also shows you can add something like a snow shed purely as a bit of scenery, even if you don't plan on adding functioning track to it. I really like abandoned bits in a scene, as it can add real interest and a sense of history. Overall, I'm really glad I left my mistakes in this video. I think it's very useful to look at this piece, to see what did work, to see what didn't work, and what I can improve on. I think because of my mistakes here, I'm actually more excited to try this foam rock carving again as soon as possible. And since I have a nifty little motorized camera dolly, we'll finish up here today with a few final cinematic clips. Okay, cinematic might be stretching it a bit, but enjoy. Thank you for watching today, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and give that subscribe button a click. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.